Hi there. In the process of becoming a Christian, I found myself asking a lot of basic questions that I was shocked to see that the Christian tradition hadn't really approached or addressed or even worried about, and for some good reasons. But as I approached Christianity and started to understand its metaphysical reality in terms of how the matrix is structured, one thing that I kept wondering about was the subjectivity of Jesus. This was a central issue to me in the sense that because I started to understand that the program of reality was in fact, if you want to put it this way, a fractal adumbration of the Jesus experience. Jesus' subjective character became absolutely paramount to me processing what was going on both a worldwide level, a historical level, and a personal level. Jesus' subjectivity is something that is almost totally ignored in Christianity. There is one key moment in which Jesus' subjectivity comes first and foremost into consciousness, and one is asked directly to relate to Jesus' experience of himself. And that's, of course, the Garden of Gethsemane, where Jesus has his moment of terrible fear and doubt about his fate. Now, I agree that this is maybe the central existential moment of the Jesus story in some ways. However, one needs to see that in a much broader context of what was going on in his head the whole time. Now, I'm not saying we can step into his head and know it, but we are supposed to know him, and it seems to me that it's a very important thing to muse on, contemplate, and speculate about, to a certain extent, what was the Jesus experience. You see, everyone wants to know Jesus, and everyone wants to seek his face and come to know him in your heart, and that's all well and good, except one thing I noticed is that no one seems to actually care about who he was. I mean, it's the ultimate irony of Christianity. No one really cares about who he was. He appears at the age 30, or maybe even some people say 32. It might have been just a year or two of a ministry, but whatever. He appears near the end of his life like a deus ex machina, and we know the story from there, and his private experience one imagines as being calm, pensive, all-knowing, omnipotent. I mean, he is God, right? But of course, he's not God in the sense of knows everything at all at once, He doesn't know everything. Jesus does not both know what it's like to speak French and what it's not like to speak French. He can't. He's a person. He is actually literally a human being who is living out what he is perceiving as a kind of story in which he is saddled with being God. Now, there's a tradition that Jesus, in the Catholic tradition, that Jesus actually had the beatific vision his whole life because he was without sin and he was divine in the incarnation. I'm not even going to argue against that. I'm just going to say we don't know what that means. And I'm not saying that Jesus didn't know he was God. By the time he got baptized by John the Baptist and went through his ministry and claimed to be in the person of God, he was confident that it had been revealed to him that he was God. And he could see how his own sinlessness was kind of a miracle in a sense. Nonetheless, there's a big difference between having it revealed to you that you are God and believing that you're God and then living it. And his experience of living it is the central story of Christ. No one cares about the person that was there for most of Jesus' life, the 10 years of, most of his adulthood, where he was just a carpenter, probably a bit of a mama's boy or something, but no one really cares about that person. How would you feel that no one's ever really asked about what he liked? What food did he like? The holidays that he celebrated, not even cared about much anymore. I mean, and maybe he would have it that way. Maybe he would say, obviously I'm in a story much bigger than me, and I don't want people to worry about myself. I mean, that's he probably would say that. That's the Christ energy to say that. But nonetheless, from our point of view, how can we not be fascinated by who Jesus was, and the fact that God selected this particular contingent person as the base of the code? I mean, Jesus is portrayed terribly in most portrayals of him in drama and film. He's dour and flat and gives solemn oratories. But where's the humanity and the passion and the energy and the fact that he's living out the craziest story of all time? Again, Jesus was Neo in the Matrix. At some point, it became revealed to Jesus that he was God. It was something he figured out. And I think this has a lot to do with he loved John the Baptist so much. And John the Baptist got him connected to ideas that I think ended up being the revelation of his own divinity, ultimately. And that's why he had to go to John the Baptist to get baptized. It was like a moment of consummation for what he knew the story was. He figured it out. And even though he knew he was going to be crucified, and all that was told to him, there's a big difference between knowing it and then facing it. Because facing it is, I mean, that is the moment of Gethsemane, and then afterwards, you know, from Jesus' point of view, at this point, it is the overwhelming truth of God becomes just the reality. Like, you are in the story. He was, at that point, Jesus was in a story more than a world. And there was no turning back on the story. I mean, this is why he could say, "Forgive them, Father, they know not what they do." Because he realized that there was no turning back and becoming selfish about it. It was done. It was glorious. And it all came true. I mean, that's what happened to Christ. His crazy story came true. And he knew he was going to be resurrected. But again, it's very different knowing that you're going to be resurrected and knowing and being resurrected. It is because Jesus went through the experience of the discovery of his divinity. And it really does, I mean, he believed it. It was real. He was divine. And he was given special revelation. And he did have powers from God. But nonetheless, the human story was that it was a journey for Jesus. A journey that can be recapitulated not in the sense of divinity, but in the sense of an experience of discovering that you're actually in the story of God. This is the idea of the body of Christ, that you literally participate in the same journey. You too can become kind of Neo. You're not setting the program. You're not perfect. You've damaged yourself a little bit, so you're participating in the program through the one who wasn't damaged. But think about him. Who was he? What was his internal experience of God like and prayer? And I'm not saying you can know for sure. I would never speculate anything for sure that I know about Jesus' subjectivity. But to ignore it and to just treat him as God in disguise is a failure. It's a failure of accepting the humanity of Jesus. He's not just an avatar like in the Hindu tradition where God sends a God robot down to show us all the way. No. Jesus was just a person with a family, with relatives, with friends, with, Jesus went to the bathroom. I mean, I think we need to remember that Jesus went to the bathroom. Jesus went to the bathroom. It is because he is a person that what is revealed through Jesus is a unique connection between man and God. It is revealed the depths of how godlike man can be. Man can be totally godlike because Jesus was God. I mean, making sense of that is hard. Making sense of it was impossible for Jesus. That's why he humbled himself. And, you know, it's not like when you figure out you're God, you don't cheer around and say and be happy about it necessarily. It is an overwhelming holy shit moment. Holy shit. Pardon my French. You know, I will follow the story. I will obey. You know, it's beyond ethics. You're in charge. I mean, this is an affront to our modern sensibility. But this is why Jesus was praying all the time. I mean, why was God praying all the time? It's because that's the connection. That was the depth of the connection. Even though he was it, he also was relating to it as God and the other that he was praying to. I mean, it was what was revealed to Jesus was an existential burden so total that playing it out was not even an option to Jesus. It was, even though it obviously was experienced as a choice, there was a sense of just total existential obligation to it. And that grew and grew and grew up to the cross, in which existential obligation becomes literally totally determined. They nailed his hands and his feet to the thing. I mean, he was absolutely determined at that point, physically determined. Who was Jesus? He's all around us. He's the program. He's everything we are. But who was he? Let us know him as a person, because only as a person is he a God.